And it's with gems of television past that Chris Searle, here on 2, spins this week's Windmill.
Where is it? I definitely put it somewhere where I know exactly where to find it. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? There it is. Got it. Oh gosh, that's better. Crumbs. Well, now, it's all right. The BBC has paid its electricity bill. But it takes a power cut or a blown fuse to make you realize just how dark it gets at night. Dark, creepy sometimes, maybe a bit scary. Things go bump. Ooh. Ooh. But that's where this week's Windmill whisks you by Telepower. Just for an hour, it's night time. And we've tapped a rich vein in the archive because there's been a lot of nocturnal activity. Like 2 days and nights of solid bopping at the Rio Carnival. We'll be at the golf course all day and night for Marty Feldman's crazy round of golf. We'll wait for nightfall to see a baby owl's first attempt at flying. We'll be out at sea at the dead of night to watch the lighthouse men at work. And we'll be out in the early hours to follow the fire brigade on a 999 call. In Ottawa, we'll stay up late to watch Torville and Dean win their greatest triumph. And we'll relive some of the greatest events in the sky at night with our star guest, Patrick Moore. And we'll be finding out how a camera can now see in the dark. Look at this, with the help of military technology. Gosh, okay, let's put the lights on. Oh, that's better. Well, now you know why we try not to make programs by candlelight. Dinner in the Works canteen, maybe. Programs, no. We begin in the distant wastes of northern Alaska, where you can sometimes see one of the most strange and spectacular sights in the world. It happens at night, and it's almost impossible to film. It was Kieran Prenderville who went to Alaska to unravel one of nature's greatest mysteries.
This far north on the globe, driving along a lonely road in such a vast wilderness can be a little unnerving. Things you normally take for granted don't always behave as you'd expect them to. Oh, it's all right during the day, but as night draws in, you can experience some strange effects. The radio can suddenly get interrupted as though the signal's breaking up. Even power companies report odd fluctuations in the current along their high-tension wires. Behind these strange disturbances lies one single cause, which we can experience. But it affects us in a much different way. Because, like Alaska itself, it can be breathtakingly beautiful. The Aurora Borealis, or Northern Lights, the most spectacular natural wonder in the world. To see these giant curtain-like folds of light once in a lifetime is satisfying enough. But here, near the Arctic Circle, you can view this extraordinary display, on average 240 nights of the year.
The extraordinary light show of the aurora borealis. While that's lighting up the night sky in the Arctic Circle, most of us are snuggled up in our cosy beds. But who sleeps with whom? What about the baby, for example? There's one body of opinion which says a baby should sleep alone, but there's another which insists that a baby will end up happier if he sleeps with his parents. Well, apart from wondering if he's going to have any brothers and sisters, what about the worry of a child getting squashed by a heavy grown-up? People move about when they're asleep. Well, a Tomorrow's World producer decided to take the risk and find out just how dangerous it really is. He rigged up a time-lapse camera in his own bedroom, and he and his wife and his child went to bed. And in the morning, they all woke up safe and happy. We don't know who or what woke them. It's a pound to a penny, it wasn't Mr. Hemmings, filmed by Dennis Mitchell in 1957.
Nearly morning. It's gone colder. Already the knocker-up is moving briskly down the street, rattling on the windows of his sleeping customers. I asked him why the knocker-up still flourished. After all, I said, there are plenty of alarm clocks.
Oh, there's plenty of alarm clocks, but they don't trust them, that's all. You see, an alarm clock is not a human being. An alarm clock can break down.
But you can break down, too.
Ah, but if I break down, I have my brother.
This sleeping's all very well, but some places never go to sleep. Just watch the brilliant trick photography at the start of this sequence, where night seems to fall in just a few seconds on a town which depends for its existence on gambling all day long and all through the night. Nobody cares if you sleep all day, as long as you spend all night long in a desert town in the Badlands of Nevada. No words, just music and dazzling pictures of a neon city called
Vegas.
Somewhere in Las Vegas, there must be the biggest light bulb shop in the world. Now, one of my very favorite funny men was Marty Feldman. He noticed something about golfers. They don't give up. And he's the star of our Windmill comedy classic this week in The Loneliness of the Long-Distance Golfer. Night is when most people get some well-earned rest after a hard day, and most of us don't spare a moment's thought for the people for whom nightfall is just another time of day. When we're asleep, or most of us, work goes on round the clock in hospitals, telephone exchanges, power stations, even ships at sea. For sailors, life could be very dangerous if it weren't for lighthouses, which tell anyone near the shore at night where he is. England's most storm-lashed lighthouse is on Bishop Rock, 4 miles west of the Isles of Scilly. The light flashes twice every 15 seconds as the revolving lenses sweep the beams round the horizon. In 1974, the same intense oil-powered light had been reaching out to ships for 116 years. The lighthouse keeper's routine is as regular and timeless as the light itself.
Outside temperature 47, inside temperature 55, barometer 28.84, wind direction west, wind speed 7, weather conditions cloudy squalls, Round Island and Penennis lighthouses visible, Fleming's and Gunner's Buoys invisible.
During duty on the light, every day, 7 days a week, a 24-hour watch is shared between the 3 keepers. Midnight until 4 in the morning, 4 a.m. to midday, then 4-hour shifts until midnight. A 56-hour week, none of it counting as overtime.
So this might sound a bit, gumptious or big-headed, but being on the Bishop Rock, you feel a slight cut above the other keepers, but probably I'm wrong. There's something a bit more special about the Bishop Rock, because this is the most southwesterly point of the British Isles. After this rock, there is nothing for 3,000 miles. There's nothing to look at to probably the ordinary layman, but well, to myself, it is beautiful. I don't know why, I can't express it in words, but something nice about it, This, more so than any other station, really, because of its being so old-fashioned, so antique. Because the equipment on this station, apart from the engines, of course, are very, very old. And this also has a slight fascination for me, that the light which shines through the lens here was seen by the old masters on the old schooners. This also appeals to me. What I see from the mainland, or from the island, should I say, looking at towards this place sometimes, the beams going around, I think to myself, hundreds of years ago, old ship's masters saw that very same light from that very same lens, from those very same oil burners.
There's another important job which hasn't changed for a while. It doesn't matter what time of day or night it is, the people who do it have got to be ready for action. They can be called out at any time.
you get shot early in the morning, you're sort of waking yourself up, not knowing what you've got. It's sort of a bit exciting. It could be anything at all.
No, I don't think so. I wonder what it is, actually. You won't believe this. It's a drain tester.
Just a smoke bomb in a phone box. Makes you wonder what kind of person gets the fire brigade out on a false alarm at 3 o'clock in the morning. The firemen would certainly like to meet them and tell them just how they feel. Not happy. But on the other side of the world, in Rio, there's the happiest event of the year. It fills the main street with rhythm and spectacle continuously for 48 hours. The dancers have been sewing sequins all year for the long, crazy days and nights of Carnival. Well, there are special occasions sometimes when television is allowed to stay up all night, and we've found 3 outstanding ones in our film library. We start in 1956, when people watched television sets like this one. Do you like my HMV console model, floor standing? And what about the lights? Dead modern for the 1950s. My stripy chair. I'm feeling really up to date. I've got my nice warm cup of Ovaltine, and I've read the news from the Times, which incidentally didn't have news on the front cover in those days. It just had small ads. It was what they called the personal column. All the news was inside. Nothing about the television. The newspapers didn't think much of TV. They thought it was a bit like competition, so they didn't print what was on the telly. So I got my Radio Times instead for that, with Sir Mortimer Wheeler, the archaeologist, on the front cover, and some nice adverts of the time. Look at this one. Somewhere there's someone who just love a cable from you. Gosh, I wonder when somebody last sent a cable to anybody. And there's some nice adverts in the middle as well. Look at this one. Whatever your position in life, you can enjoy the luxury of Pifco electric shaving. And look, the price, only 81 shillings and sixpence. And it's just over £4 in today's money. But what we're actually looking for is what's on telly. And as it's Saturday night, let's have a look. Here we are. Saturday Night Out. Come with Robert Beattie, the man with the mic. See things happen, when they happen, where they happen. Well, Saturday Night Out was a series which had live coverage of events which happened to be going on a Saturday night. If there wasn't an event, they'd stage one, like this, on the 11th of February, 1956, on a railway line in Longmoor.
Merlin was born in 1919 and was retired from service in 1955. A service that she fulfilled faithfully and well. Goodness knows how many hundreds of thousands of miles she has covered in the course of her duties as a passenger express locomotive. But now she faces her last journey, her last mile, because tonight Merlin is going to die. Die not meanly in a, as one might expect, in a breaker's yard, but gloriously in the service of the British Army. For tonight, Merlin provides a realistic exercise in sabotage, and tomorrow in salvage. This is her night. This is her hour. This is her last run. Let's not rob her of her glory. Goodbye, Merlin. Goodbye, old girl. Okay, driver.
Well, Merlin the engine's going to be used by the Army for sabotage practice. It's terribly exciting, as you can gather, and live, remember. They're going to set the train going and then blow up the track as it passes over it and see what happens. Commentator Robert Beattie hands over to commentator Bob Danvers Walker a mile down the track, and the plan is for this epoch-making event to make television history. The viewer is sitting on the edge of his chair, his knuckles getting whiter as the train thunders, or rather whistles, down the line.
Now, out of that belt of timber in the background comes engine number 30740 and 3 coaches belting down the track to meet their end in a mighty crash over the embankment. Nearly 200 tons traveling at 45 miles an hour and unmanned. They've lashed the whistle down. They've lashed the whistle down, and you'll hear her coming down there. Down she comes, closing the gap to where the Royal Engineer sappers have laid their trap. See that smoke? Here she comes. A line to be buckled and wrecked by high explosive, which will send her hurtling down the 30-foot slope into a snow and ice-covered marsh. Here she comes, vivid realism that brings to life those dramatic stories of special service and commando raids of the war. Now, here is high drama in real life. It's terrifying. Now, anything can happen in the final holocaust of twisted and torn metal. You've never seen anything like this before on your television. Now, watch. What a grand old lady. Still on her legs. Well, you've got to take your hat off to her. Great heavens, what a fantastic sight. Still blowing a whistle.
Well, once again, Saturday Night Out is showing you things happen as they happen, when they happen, and where they happen.
If they happen, you could sense, couldn't you, the awful disappointment in Bob Danvers Walker's voice. Apparently, the reason the train ambled down the slope instead of exploding in a mass of twisted metal like it was supposed to was that somebody had the bright idea of lashing down the whistle. So with all that whistling, poor old Merlin just ran out of steam. With live television, some you win, some you lose. Well, now it's 1964. I've got my 1960s GEC table model television, although there's no colour telly yet. And it's election night. Now, the Tories may well be confident, and Sir Alec Douglas-Home may well reckon he's going to be Prime Minister again, but there's always the chance that somebody else might get in. A man called Harold Wilson. And there's his picture on the front. Well, let's have a look at the Radio Times for election night. There's the coverage, covering the election tonight and tomorrow. There's Robert Mackenzie. Look at Robin Day's glasses in the 1960s. And Cliff Mitchellmore. They were all going to contribute to this exciting night of television. And there's the programme page itself. The programme's going to go on from 9:25 in the evening till 4 o'clock in the morning. So it's quite a long one. Well, they didn't have computers in the studio in 1964. They had hundreds of people instead. And handwritten captions. You see the numbers filled in with kind of biro. And a famous invention, the swingometer.
Now then, there should now be some news of swing, so we'll join Bob up at the indicator.
Well, remember earlier I said if 4 people in every 100 were to change sides compared to how they voted in 1959, there would be a Labour government. It looks very much like that now. It's settling in around 4.2. In fact, there's been a tremendous amount of wobbling compared to many elections, big swing variations, enormous difference coming in all through the evening. But it is settling down now in a quite conclusive way here.
Well, all election night specials before and since have had a camera in Trafalgar Square, where people are still celebrating until 1 o'clock in the morning and beyond, although people aren't allowed to fool around in the fountains anymore.
Well, there we are. We'd better leave Trafalgar Square. It's nice to look at. We have some other people nice to look at waiting for us up in the studio. Sir Gerald Nabarro, and Lord Boothby sitting together and facing Cliff Mitchell.
Gerald Nabarro nudging Lord Boothby to tell him that we're about to start to talk. Now, both of you are political animals. You both fought a great number of elections. Did you have a feeling in your bones that this is the way this election would go?
Oh, no, I didn't. I shall lose a lot of money tomorrow morning if Wilson and his crowd get in. I thought the Tories would win.
Lord Boothby?
Well, I never had any doubt. I thought the Labour Party would win with a workable majority, no more than that.
Well, it's a shame there aren't any characters like that in politics anymore. Lord Boothby was right. Harold Wilson did get in. And talking of prime ministers, there was one Tory MP in that election who, in those days, didn't attract any more attention than this.
Let us take Finchley in London, which Mrs. Thatcher has held for the Conservatives. Fairly predictable, I
This is
think.
a disappointment for the Liberals. The Liberals came second. They very much hoped to win this. It was one they had got a majority in local government elections on.
And that was all they said about Margaret Thatcher in 1964. Little did they know. Well, now we're almost up to date. It's 1984, and I've got a colour television in my bedroom. Look, a little portable set. Can you imagine anything more luxurious than watching telly in bed? It's terrific, isn't it? Well, it's March the 25th, and it's 3:45 in the morning in England. It's only 10:45 in the evening in Ottawa, in Canada, where the World Ice Dance Championships have reached their final stage after a technical delay. Well, even at nearly 4 o'clock in the morning, there are 2 million British viewers still up and glued to their sets, like me, to see a very special performance. And they won't be disappointed.
what can one say? You only have to look, you only have to listen, and you know that you have seen the best in the world. That audience is absolutely marvelous. So too for Jane Torval and Christopher Dean.
And now for our peek behind the glass bit on the front with the pictures on it and inside the strange world of television. And as this programme is about night, we thought we'd do a bit of rummaging through the library shelves and see if we could find some of the tricks cameramen use if they want to film animals at night. If you want pictures of animals behaving normally, the animal equivalent of filling in their pools coupons and putting out the bins, one thing they don't want is a film crew suddenly turning great big spotlights on them. They tend to stay indoors. Well, here's a great example from a Peter Scott programme of 1954 about badgers. Badgers only ever come out at night, and this was the first time they'd ever been filmed.
And here is the set, the mouth of the hole there in the centre, and there's the badger.
It's the first little cub that's ever been filmed, as far as I know.
That's a badger cub. He only just came out, didn't he? He wasn't doing more than only just coming out. Well, that's the beginning. That's the most incredible thing, in a way, because it looks like broad daylight there. I mean, it doesn't look remotely as though that was taken at dead of night, and yet I gathered that it was.
Oh, yes.
Well, then your first thing, you selected your set, you selected your place. Well, then, what was the next step?
Well, the next step was really to decide just how much light we wanted and how we were going to get it. And we reckoned that we should want about 6,000 to 8,000 watt lamps to illuminate the set that you've just seen in that picture.
Well, now, a 1,000-watt lamp is a jolly big lamp, isn't it?
Well, it is, you know. Here is one, and it's a very big thing, and it gives a lot of light. Yeah. Well, we weren't going to start the badgers straight off on there. Our idea was to make them used to light by starting them with a little feeble little 25-watt lamp, and then step that up gradually until we got to this one.
Good psychology, that. Work up to bright lights gradually and the badgers won't even notice. In 1977, BBC One had a badger watch for 5 nights in 1 week. At 11:30 each night, they went live to a badger set somewhere down in the woods. No more filming with 1,000-watt light bulbs. This was 70s technology. They used infrared lights, which looks completely dark to people and badgers. And then they used cameras which can see things in infrared light. Here are the badger pictures they showed.
There is a badger. That is the first television picture live of a badger ever seen on television through this unique system.
A little later here, we were even more thrilled, weren't we, when the mother joined her children at this same entrance to the set.
Yes, and she doesn't reckon they've kept themselves very spruce. She's grooming them. Oh, I don't know any lovelier creatures than that.
Then something happened which took everyone by surprise. Another nocturnal creature, an owl, was feeding her chicks in a nest halfway up the tree. One of the chicks fell out, and it landed in the most dangerous possible place, right by the badger set.
There we are, on the ground, just by the hole.
God, that's a nail biter, right close up to the hole. And what happens if Brock comes out?
Interesting thing.
What would happen?
Well, I don't know, because who else has seen this? You can't see this in daylight. And an owl like that, he could get eaten, or the strangeness of him there could make the rock pop back a bit. But it's a jolly dangerous thing, and it shows you really why birds like owls have to breed so many, because they are gone up. Yep. Where's he gone?
There's the badger.
And you can hear him sniffing. It's a marvellous thing that an owl so young as that, just come out, has got the instinct to start to get up above ground, out of the reach, isn't it? You know, the exciting...
What's he doing? Just clinging on?
He's just holding.
He's having a rest. He's having a rest at the moment. But the exciting thing about that is that is something that you could not see
for yourself without this infrared.
The baby owl eventually made it back to its nest. But what a stroke of luck to have seen that happen during a live program. It was all shot with infrared light. Now you don't need any lights at all. Cameras can take pictures in virtually total darkness. The light from the stars is enough to get a clear picture, thanks to a gadget designed to help the army see in the dark. It's called an image intensifier camera, and this is it. On the front is a conventional zoom lens. It's what goes on behind the lens that's important. In there is an electronic box of tricks which can boost the picture, or the light level of the picture, anything up to 10,000 times. Let's have a look at a picture of me, for example, just using a candle and nothing else. So, there's the camera, there's the candle. Let's turn the studio lights down to nothing, so that all we're left with is the light from a candle. You can just see it, can't you, moving around in your picture. Now let's see what the image intensifier camera can see. Look at that. Brilliant light. It's as if it was broad daylight. But now let's take it one stage further, shall we? Let's blow out the candle and then see what happens. How about that? It's extraordinary, isn't it? Now let's go back to the studio camera again now, just to demonstrate that we're not up to any jiggery-pokery. Now let's put the studio lights on again and you'll see. There. That's what that image intensifier camera can do. It's quite extraordinary, isn't it? It was used for a Wildlife on One program in 1981 to take pictures of an unexpected friendship. The program was called 20th Century Fox.
In just one small location in the middle of Bristol, we watched the people who put out food for the local foxes during the night, in the same way that other people feed their wild birds during the day. This fox is obviously accustomed to receiving food from passing motorists.
Is anybody there? Is anybody there? Oh, there you are. Oh. Well, now it's time to find out yet again that the amateurs can beat the pros at their own game and win. This is an amateur film of nightlife in London, shot by Mr. Matthew Nathan in 1933. It's steeped in the atmosphere of the madcap 30s, when people really were called gay young things. They used to say things like, "What ho?" and "Pip pip." And what makes it even more rare is that Mr. Nathan managed to make his film without any extra lighting. He just used whatever light was available.
Piccadilly, Piccadilly, the playground of the gay. Piccadilly, Piccadilly, where the traffic goes one way. In the daytime, there's lots of light, but at nighttime, well, you're asked to lose your white in Piccadilly. Piccadilly, dear old London's broad highway. The soldier up in Poona, the sailor on the sea, the pioneer and the engineer, the captain of the schooner, the fighters on the air sing of you and Leicester Square. Piccadilly, Piccadilly, the playground of the gay. Piccadilly, Piccadilly, where the traffic goes one way. In the daytime, Granddad's searching for truth, but at nighttime, he's searching for his youth in Piccadilly. Piccadilly, dear old London's broad highway.
Our star guest on Windmill today is the presenter of the longest-running series in television history anywhere in the world. It's Britain's best-loved astronomer, Patrick Moore. Welcome, Patrick.
Nice to be here.
Now, I imagine that your interest in astronomy must have gone back long before the beginning even of that programme. How did it actually start?
I can remember the exact day. I was sitting in the armchair of the dining room at my old home in East Grinstead in Sussex. I was 6 years old, and that goes back to 1929. I was rather bored. I looked at the bookshelf, and there I found a little book belonging to my mother, who was vaguely interested in astronomy. It was called The Story of the Solar System by G.F. Chambers, published in 1898. And I read this book and was fascinated by it. Looked around for another, found it, and I went on from there. Because I had no idea then that I'd ever go on television. In fact, of course, there wasn't any television.
Well, apart from your presence on the programme, one of the most distinctive things about it is the signature tune that introduces it each month. Where did that come from?
Well, it's Peleus and Melisande Suite at the Castle Gate by Sibelius. And that was a combination of Paul Johnstone, who was the first producer of The Sky at Night, and myself. We looked round for some suitable music, and we thought that a bit of Sibelius would be rather a good thing. And we've used it ever since, you know, and we certainly wouldn't change it now.
Well, the earliest surviving recording of The Sky at Night comes from 1960, and the clip we want to show now has got the music with it.
Good evening. Well, I'm afraid Burnham's comet turned out to be something of a disappointment. Quite a number of people wrote in to me to say that they'd managed to see it all right, but it didn't really come up to expectations, and remember, I warned you that it might not. It's become very faint now.
Well, the programme's in its 29th year, which is a tremendous record. Have you ever missed a programme? Has anything ever gone wrong?
No, I haven't missed a programme, but all kinds of things have gone wrong. But that must happen, of course. Particularly remember that in the old days, everything was live. Now, I remember once I was doing a programme live and also being tele-recorded for Australia for some reason, and I opened my mouth to make some world-shattering pronouncement, and in flew a very large fly. Now, what could I do? I could either do the noble thing and swallow it, or I could eject it. Well, to my eternal credit, I swallowed it. And Paul Johnstone in the gallery said that he saw a look of glazed horror come into my eyes, and I gave a strangled gulp, and I went on. And my mother had the right idea later on. She said, yes, dear, it was very nasty for you, but so much worse for the fly, and I suppose it was.
Well, from one unidentified flying object, put it crudely, to another one. I know you have strong views about UFOs, but it was the subject of one of your programmes once.
It was indeed, and I was joined by one of my oldest and closest friends, better known as I think as a comedian, actually, of course, a very brilliant scientist, no less a person than Michael Bentine. Right. We were discussing flying saucers in all their various shapes and forms and guises. Caught it. Well, Michael, we used a Frisbee, obviously, because it is aerodynamically shaped. And when these things were first reported, they were always known as flying saucers. I'm not quite sure when they changed over to UFO, but a flying saucer it could be. But people who have reported them say that there are other shapes as well, don't they?
Yes, indeed. We've got the famous Havana shape from Cuba, the cigar up there, which launches the little saucers, apparently. And then you've got the dumbbell shape. Now, I like that one because you've got the nuclear power plant here, and that sends the ion beam straight up the accelerator tube, separated from the crew's quarters, who are then shielded from the nuclear power plant, and that generates an electromagnetic field. Out goes the ion beam, and by reaction, the deep space ship then moves off.
Then, of course, you have the famous lampshade model.
Worn on the head, it looks very, very attractive.
Michael Bentine believes in them. Do you?
No, frankly, I don't. Although I remember once I saw quite a cluster of flying saucers. I was out in the dome of my 15-inch reflecting telescope, making an observation of the moon. And this goes back now 20 years, I suppose. And suddenly I saw a whole cluster of flying saucers coming towards me. And I thought, well, this is it. The Martians have come at last. And it was some time before I realized what it was. Do you know what they were? What? Pollen catching the moonlight. They gave an amazingly saucer-like appearance.
Isn't that extraordinary?
Quite incredible.
Right. I suppose the moon was regarded as a mysterious flying object once upon a time.
I suppose it was. Of course, the moon's always been my own pet subject, and I was mapping the moon when I was a youngster. And I was, in fact, one of the NASA moon map team in the days before Apollo, when the whole idea of going there still seemed to lie very far in the future.
How exciting. But the one thing, up until quite recently, that nobody had ever seen was the back of the moon. And when they finally got a spaceship round the back to take pictures, that must have been a very exciting time.
It was. We'd got photographs of it by unmanned probes before, but the first time it was actually seen was by the crew of Apollo 8.
Carry
impressions of what he's seen today. I know my own impression is that it's a vast, lonely, forbidding expanse of nothing. And it certainly would not appear to be a very inviting place to live or work.
Well, Patrick Moore, what did you think of that?
Quite incredible. One thing we've got to bear in mind, I think, they were magnificent pictures. I'm not going to say they show us more detail than we've got from the orbiters, because they probably don't. But don't forget that people were actually seeing them direct for the first time, and this is bound to add to our knowledge.
You covered virtually all those great Apollo missions. There must be some moments which stand out in your mind.
There are plenty, of course. The most dramatic of all was the first time anyone landed on the moon. And I remember hearing Neil Armstrong's voice, "The Eagle has landed." That was a great moment.
40 feet down, 2.5. Picking up some dust. Great shadow. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. We've had shutdown. We copy you down, Eagle. Okay, everybody, T1. Stand by for T1. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Well, the final Apollo mission, Apollo 17, was the only one that took place at night, wasn't it? And you were actually there.
I was indeed. It wasn't intended to be a night launch, but there were various holes, and it did finally go up after dark. And it was a most incredible sight, the only actual moon launch I saw.
10, 9, 8, 7, ignition sequence started. All engines are started.
Oh.
We have ignition, 2, 1, 0. We have a liftoff. We have a liftoff, and it's lighting up the areas. It's just like daylight here at Kennedy Space Center as the Saturn V is moving off the pad.
It was dazzlingly bright. Remember, there are 3 men in the middle of that. But what impressed me most of all, I think, was the kind of wall of sound that hit you. Of course, came after you saw the actual brilliancy. And there it goes, disappearing into the sky, carrying 3 men on their way to the moon. And that was really quite a sight.
What have the Apollo missions taught us?
They've told us a great deal more about the moon than we knew before, obviously, because the Apollo missions were more or less there and back reconnaissances, but they showed us what the kind of world the moon was. And I may say, so far as the moon was concerned, we got it pretty well right, I think. But now, the thing is very different, because by the time men go back to the moon, we've got to have much more sophisticated rockets, we've got to have space stations, and we've got to have rescue provision. Hence, of course, the idea of now concentrating upon space stations and things like shuttles.
But the sort of image that stays in our mind of those Apollo missions was the almost casual approach that the astronauts had when they started leaping in low-gravity conditions, you know, jumping around and playing golf and doing all sorts of things.
Well, I know all the moon astronauts, I think, because I was involved in the mapping. And I think it's fair to say that the astronauts of the Apollo period, they're the same as anybody else, except that they've got very much more than their fair share of mental stability and physical ability, too.
I was strolling on the moon one day in a merry, merry month of December. Now, May's the month. May, that's right. May is the year of the month. Hey, John, this is perfect with the loom and the rover and you and the old flag. Let's go, would you, Charlie? You got all your steering. It's great. Oh, this is going to be some kind of different ride.
Well, I suppose all NASA's efforts now are focused on the space shuttle, aren't they? And that's a whole new chapter in space exploration.
Well, it's bound to be. I mean, there are going to be space stations, there are going to be space shuttles, and the kind of images we've seen now would have been sheer science fiction, not only when I was born or when I first started taking an interest in astronomy, but even when I began the Sky at Night series, because in April 1957, I had no idea then that I'd be showing pictures of men on the moon within 15 years.
Incredible, isn't it?
Off the clock got it right, I didn't.
Will you get into space, do you think, ever, Patrick, yourself?
Sadly, no. No, I'm afraid I won't. For one thing, I'm a great deal too old. I haven't got the qualifications, and one's got to be 100% physically fit. No, I won't go, but I'm sure that somebody someday is going to do a Sky at Night from space, or even from the surface of the moon. I'm only sorry it won't be me.
The quality of television pictures has changed so much, hasn't it? And the clip we're going to look at now really shows that. McCandless actually floating free in space on a kind of armchair.
Well, that may have been one small step for Neil, but it's a heck of a big leap for me.
Moving away from the orbiter out to a distance of 300 feet.
Yeah, it looks like another sunny day up here.
McCandless and his manned maneuvering unit constitute a separate spacecraft of their own now.
That picture would have been sheer science fiction only a few decades ago.
Yeah.
Shows how far we've progressed in only a very few years.
Incredible pictures.
Quite incredible, isn't it?
What's happening in the sky at night now?
Well, plenty of things. There always is. I think we're all getting ready for Halley's Comet. In fact, I did have a look at that last night with my own telescope. It's very faint now, but it's going to be visible with the naked eye, we hope, during December. And there's going to be a great night on the night of March the 13th, 14th next year, when the Giotto probe, the European one, actually goes right into Halley's Comet and sends back, we hope, pictures of the icy nucleus, about which we know little at the moment. And we're going to put those on the air straight away as they come through.
March the 13th.
That's going to be a very exciting night indeed, believe me.
What's your favourite image from space?
Oh, there are so many. One that always sticks in my mind was taken in 1976 from a Viking probe, which had landed upon Mars and shows Martian sunset.
Now, you spend a lot of your nights up with your telescope looking at the sky at night. Now, in the daytime, what do you do? Do you sleep or do you have other interests?
I've got plenty of other interests, and one or two of these actually come out of the programs. I remember a long time ago, and I think we're going back again now to 1960 or thereabouts, we were doing a program about Sir William Herschel, the discoverer of the planet Uranus, and he found that in 1781. Well, he didn't begin life as an astronomer. He began life as an organist, and he composed some music. And we thought it would be rather fun to root out some of Herschel's music, which is rather like Mozart gone stale, frankly. And I found a bit in the Royal College of Music, and although I'm not a pianist, I'm a xylophonist, I very bravely played it on the air during our Sky at Night program about Herschel.
Well played.
I wonder when that was last played. Around about 1780, I should think. And it may well be a couple of hundred years before it's played again.
Well, Patrick Moore, thank you very much for being such a charming guest on Windmill today.
Thank you for having me.
Nights are also for dreaming. But have you ever wondered why you dream? In a program called Children Talking, Gerald Harrison asked what it is that actually makes you have dreams.
Every night when I go to sleep I have cheese for supper and then it makes me dream because it lays on my chest.
How do you know it's the cheese that does it?
Because that's the only time I get nightmares.
Now, how do you think cheese can make you dream?
Don't know.
Do you stop eating cheese?
No.
Why not?
Because my mum doesn't cook anything else except cheese on toast at night.
Oh. Well, now it's time for us to have our cheese on toast and say goodnight. The crew of Apollo 8 were orbiting the moon on Christmas Eve, 1968, and they had a special goodnight thought for us back home on Earth. Till Windmill's next orbit round the BBC's film archive. Goodbye.